Hi all, my name is Emily and I wanted to thank you so much for joining us tonight for our virtual wine tasting with Jack Keegan. Jack is an instructor emeritus who taught the ever-popular viticulture and enology class for 25 years at Miami. Jack's wine class is always full and his chapter wine tastings are well attended, and tonight is no exception. The Miami University Alumni Association is so excited for the opportunity to bring Jack to you to help you celebrate your holiday season. There is an Ask a Question box located on the bottom of the screen. I will be monitoring these questions throughout, so please feel free to ask any questions you may have, and I will relay them to Jack throughout the tasting. We will try to get to as many as we can. With all of that being said, go ahead and take it away, Jack.
Thank you, Emily. Happy holidays, everyone. I hope you are sort of getting in the mood. This is truly a unique year, as you all know. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. My condolences to the alumni up in the Cleveland area. You've had more than your share of difficulties with the weather already this winter. I have friends, in fact, who were a couple of days without power, and some of you still may not have power at home. It really is tough with that heavy, wet snow. I will have to say here in Oxford, it was really nice. It even stayed off the roads, but the trees were beautiful. And now, of course, today it was in the 40s, and hopefully it warmed up there, and so you'll be getting back to normal. I certainly hope so with that. First thing I wanted to do, because many of you ask, is to give you a list of wines. These are a list of wines that we're doing today, and this is the arrangement that we're doing. Obviously, we're doing the first two sparklings first, and then we're doing the white, the Gruner, then we'll do the Rosé, the Cotes de Rhone, and then the Lirac, both of which are from the south of France. I thought I would start and put you maybe in a little bit of a holiday festive mood by showing you what Oxford looks like today. So these are some pictures I took this evening as I was going around, again, here at the chapel. Again, as it was getting to be dark, it was really sort of quite nice to see. I laughed. If any of you, of course, are architecture majors, maybe you're shuddering at the moment. As I show you the architecture building there in the light, you probably spent way too many hours there when you were here. And again, this is the pulley tower. I started to laugh when I saw the picture afterwards. You'll notice there's a B&B plumbing truck in there. I haven't had any water for 9 days, and B&B and I have become good friends. Well, sort of. So it's sort of interesting. But again, you see the light on the pulley tower when I was there. Again, Western alumni, the cottage through all the trees. I thought that made a really nice picture. And again, for those of you who went to, especially I remember how many years I sang and went to Presser Hall. So I thought Presser looked pretty nice in the evening there. So I thought I'd give you a taste of what campus looks like at this time of year in there. Again, and uptown, again, you can see the various storefronts that are there along the side at the Uptown Park. What they've done this year, and unfortunately all the lights weren't on, but they did a lot of artwork also in the park, and I thought some of it was pretty interesting looking, and so I thought I would share that with you too for Oxford. And then I am sure if you were ever here in Oxford during the Christmas time, you certainly saw the Lions Club selling their trees there right in the Uptown Park. And so I thought I would give you a little bit of a feeling for Christmas or what's going on here in Oxford today. Some things, of course, I always try to do too is give you some ideas of what's going in the world of wine. There's a new DOCG, let's see, Denominazione Origine Controllata e Garantita. It's Italian, and Terre a Fere is in fact a new area, a fine wine area up in the Piedmont. This is where Barolo and Barbaresco come from. In fact, they use Nebbiolo and Arnese for the two grapes that they're using there. So this is brand new. Interestingly, of course, you know, in these difficult times, hard seltzer continues to grow and evolve. There's a lot of changes going on in the market, and so it's sort of interesting along those ways. It's been a hard time in California with the between the fires and the drought, etc. So it's been a bit of a problem there. Again, as you know, COVID, of course, continues to affect us all. And so many people are going to continue using drink delivery services for the drinks. And of course, you know that here in Ohio, we signed you can have actually drinks to go now. Here in Ohio, it is legal. And so those are some things that have happened. The Australians, of course, are reeling currently because of a political tiff. You know how those things work in the world. China has leveled 107 to 200% tariff on wines from Australia. And China is the number one importer of Australian wines, or at least was. And so the Australians are trying to figure out what to do with that. A couple other things I thought were interesting in the world of wine. This is a new label, and again, sort of working on the information that went on, for example, on 19 Crimes. I'm not actually sure I really want an app on my phone so that the wine talks to me, but that's in fact actually what's happening with these winery tales. And so they have a way so you can sort of sign in and it will just simply begin telling you the story of the winery. So I thought that was sort of interesting and brand new in the world of wine. And I love this. I still can't believe that they got this past the ATF, but they did. And so a wine you can buy right now is this one, FU 2020. This is a sparkling rosé that's being made in Oregon and by its Nickel Point. In fact, I have a quote from the owners. It said, one day in July, our co-founder Andrew was sharing for sparkling wine, an idea for sparkling wine, and with an end to this ugly year with a bang, and instantly called Stephen to share. Stephen loved it. Drew ran to his wife, Jen, to see if she thought it was too much, and she approved the idea and the wine name as well. The label would include abbreviated profanity, so we were unsure if it would get through the federal label approval process. Well, it did. And because this year has been wild for all the wrong reasons, we're releasing this one early so you can have your hands as soon as possible. Looking for a better, brighter, happier, safer, healthier, and more equal, more understanding, and more inclusive 2021. Until then, you have FU 2020. Let's all cheer for that. So I thought that was great. It's priced at $49. I almost thought about getting it as a joke, but between the $4 in taxes and then the $12 in shipping costs, I thought, $60 for 2 bottles was a little expensive for a good joke. But you can buy, if you are interested, on the website. You can find it with no problem. I did. So I thought that was a good thing to share in the world of wine that's currently going on. The wines we're having tonight, and I'll tell you this very briefly, are from Kysela, Père et Fils. Fran Kysela is a Miami alum, and his father had an extensive wine collection. And so he thought he could work part-time in the wine business, and in fact worked for a very good importer. They are now major importers of wines and spirits and certain beers. Also, as you can see, founded in 1994, 470,900 cases, distributed in 47 U.S. states, District of Columbia, Turks and Caicos, Puerto Rico, and Canada. They sell, as you can see, craft beer, sake, spirits, cider, olive oil, wines, and water and glassware. 200 suppliers and over 1,800 SKUs. So they have a lot to choose from. They were also, in fact, Wine Enthusiast 2013 Importer of the Year. And so Fran has done very, very well for himself. And so an alum to look for. And in fact, they have many, many good wines that they bring in. Of course, when we do these things, we start with a glass of wine. And so that's what we're going to do. The wine we're going to do first is, in fact, Rubus. What has happened is a number of years ago, Fran decided to, there was a chance of getting some really good juice at good prices. And so he decided that he would put them under this sort of blanket name called Rubus. And he did a Zinfandel first in 97, and it basically went, he didn't do a whole lot with it until, again, not surprisingly, the Great Recession. And because there was a lot of juice out there, he began bottling a number of things under that name. And so what you see here is, in fact, a sparkling wine from the south of France that he does under his own name. And we'll talk a little about this. The first thing I thought I would do, I've done this before, but I think it's really important, especially with the holidays coming up, to talk about opening a bottle of wine. This is the next bottle we'll be having, the Wolfberger. But again, normally you take off, as I said, many of you have taken John Dome's class when you were here, my predecessor in the wines course, and he never liked to take the entire capsule off the bottle, and neither do I. He always said it looked naked. And this came off amazingly easily. I have wrestled with many of these, so that was very nice. They came off very well. You can see, of course, there's the cage, and of course, there is the tab that you pull down, and there's always 6 turns on this tab. I always keep my non-dominant hand. I'm a left-hander, and so my right thumb stays on the top all the time. You give it 6 turns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's open. I loosen it up a little bit. Then, of course, I grab the cork and turn the bottle. And already you can see that's coming up. Oops, and in fact, it's coming up quite lively. And so I will just ease that out of the bottle. So you just have that wonderful sound. Maybe not as loud as the pop, but still, I think, very, very nice. And so that's the proper way and the safe way to open a bottle of sparkling wine. So let's have this other one. This is the Rubus. As you can see, it's the Blanc de Blanc sparkling, and I'll tell you a bit about it after we taste it. Has a good mousse. As you can see, that's what they call, in fact, all the bubbles, like mousse, M-O-U-S-S-E. Wow, very, very nice. And in fact, it has just beautiful bubbles, really fairly small. So very nice to look at. It's always nice to do. There are a number of sparkling wine glasses. This is one. The next one I will use, in fact, is more of a typical sort of tulip, or sometimes called a flute, in there. But more and more people are using white wine glasses to drink good sparkling wines out of. And so any of them, of course, are fine. I do like the flute. I mean, look at that. I mean, the beautiful bubbles going up makes it so very, very nice to watch, if nothing else. I always call it sort of an upside down blizzard. If you smell this wine, wonderfully inviting, sort of peachy and pear, really nice fruit to this wine. Yes, just, and very, very light, effervescent, wonderfully fruity. And of course, if you taste this wine, nice mousse in the mouth. It feels very creamy, but then finishes very, very crisply. They thought that, in fact, that the dosage, in other words, the amount of sugar in this, actually, I was under the assumption in reading it that it would probably be a little sweeter than this, but it's not. I think it's really nicely balanced between the acid and the sugar, and then it's that really, really nice fruit. It's light, easy. You certainly would not mind using this also in a mimosa, etc., but I would have no trouble drinking this as is. It really is a quite nice sparkling wine. I can tell you a little bit about it. The grape varieties are certainly ones that I have had very, very rarely, and it'll be interesting, in fact, to talk about. 30% Uni Blanc. Uni Blanc is the grape that mainly goes into the production of cognac. And it is never a wine, when they make a wine out of it, that lasts a whole long time. But it's very, very common in the south of France. The other one is Aran. And this is always one of those wine geeky terms that I tell people. Aran is probably the most widely grown grape in Spain. And it typically also doesn't make a wine with a lot of character. You know, the interesting thing about this is, though, we pick sparkling wine grapes early because we don't want them to have a lot of character. If the grape has too much character, the bubbles make it too much. It's too powerful. And so you really want a wine that's sort of more restrained that you'll then turn into a sparkling wine. And so that's a good idea. 30% Colombard. French Colombard, as it was always called in obviously in America, and it used to be really, really common. Those of you who drank a lot of French Colombard in probably the late 60s and through the 70s, you don't see it as much anymore. And really, in a good spot, Colombard can make a really nice wine, but it also doesn't have a tremendous amount of flavor. And then, of course, Chardonnay, which, of course, you all know, is one of those wines or one of those grapes that, in fact, is often used for sparkling wine production. In fact, champagnes often have Chardonnay in them. Machine harvest, as you see, base wine's fermented cool, which you would expect. Second fermentation is done in a really short period of time. In fact, I was shocked, considering the quality of the bubbles in this wine, that if they only do it, and they must do it obviously in bulk, in other words, they do it in a tank, not in the individual bottle like they do champagne, or as the next wine will be, for only 2 weeks. And I frankly, I'm shocked. In fact, I may have them check that again, because 2 weeks for this quality and for this smaller bubbles, because typically if it's a short time, the bubbles are bigger. But this shows you that, in fact, this carbon dioxide, which is what is coming off of here, is well integrated into the wine. And so that's usually a sign of good quality. And so really quite nice, and really is very, very tasty. Yes. Yeah. All right. There's nothing wrong with that wine at all. Really very, very nice. So very good. So one of the things I wanted to do today is, because we're talking about a holiday party and we're talking about wines again from, as you've seen, from France and from Austria, I thought we'd talk a little about what they do for the holidays over there. And some of the things were just really fascinating to find out. So again, we'd start with France. I thought it was wonderful. Again, those of you who have been to Paris and to the Louvre, right near the Louvre, you will in fact see this area, and of course this beautiful shot of a Christmas tree, and of course the area in there. And so we're going to start, of course, in fact, spend most of our time in France. Interestingly enough, as I was going through, they, of course, have advent calendars. I know, in fact, one of my favorite things is one from Jackie Lawson. And, of course, you can now get, in fact, a friend of mine was opening a wine advent calendar. And, of course, the typical ones are chocolate. And there are all kinds of things. But, of course, the French enjoy advent calendars just as much as the rest of the world does. And, of course, it's become much more common, I think, than they used to be. It's interesting, though, of course, they don't always follow the liturgical calendar, because the first Sunday of Advent starts typically in November, but they actually, of course, start from the 1st of December normally, and so it's the 25 days for it. So it's, again, it's much more secular than it used to be also in there. And so we'll talk about some of the other things, but let's try that second wine, shall we? This is the Cremant d'Alsace. Cremant's an interesting word. It means sparkling. It's been around in France, obviously, for hundreds of years, but it really fell out of favor. And it used to be used very widely for a lot of things. But of course, Champagne used to use the word Cremant a lot, and they stopped. And of course, they used the word Champagne, and of course, the traditional method. But so the Alsatians really picked it up. But you can get a Cremant d'Alsace, you can get a Cremant de Bourgogne, you can get a Cremant de Bordeaux. They make a lot of Cremant in the Loire, so you can get a Cremant de Loire also. And so they make a lot of sparkling wine all over France. And it was the Alsatians who picked this up in like 1976 for their sparkling wines as an AOC, in other words, for a controlled name for this. And so this is from Wolfberger. And again, this is their Cremant d'Alsace. It is also Brut. And wow, talk about a mousse, a lot of bubbles. Part of that too, and of course, and I did rinse this glass well beforehand. Actually, a clean glass will have more bubbles. Very often the bubbles, if you've left any soap on it, it's not as good. And so it's always a good idea to make sure that the glass is nicely cleaned when you're done. But again, look at the bubbles. By the way, you'll notice that the bubbles come from the same point all the time. That's because it needs a point source. It needs some imperfection in the glass, or maybe a little bit of something in there. Sometimes you'll see if there's a little bit of maybe a little bit of cellulose from the dishcloth that you dried it with, and you'll see it sort of floating around with the bubbles starting, because it needs a point source. And so that's why you see that the bubbles come from the same point all the time. And again, in this wine, just beautifully with that. So again, if you smell this wine, don't need to do a lot of swishing with these wines, because the bubbles bring the aroma to your nose. Ooh, very, very different. sharper, drier. In this case, almost a little bit of touch of almost like an orange peel, almost like an orange marmalade to it. Maybe also a little bit of almost like a pears that have been cooked. Wonderful fruit and a real mineral content in there, almost a limey sort of content to the nose. And I know, how do you make a lime smell or limestone smells? But we do talk about that sort of that minerally character that you often get in a wine. And remember, these grapes are picked young, so they do have a tremendous amount of acidity. So if we taste this wine, delicious. This wine, it's interesting. I have no problem drinking the first wine. And obviously I have no problem drinking the second wine. Actually, I wouldn't mind having a second glass of that second wine. But seriously, it just has more character. It has that, it has, again, probably about the same amount of sugar, probably a bit less, but it has so much more of a mineral character. And there's so much more flavor in the mouth that really lingers. It's, again, it's sort of a crazy term. It's a more serious wine in a lot of ways than the first one. The first one's wonderful, easy drinking, delicious. But this one is also, and this one is has a little bit more character. I would also think would stand up more to food. I could see doing this with any number of things like scallops or a number of other dishes that would take, have a little bit of character to them themselves, because this wine would certainly stand up to them. Where I think of the first one as being more of a strictly an aperitif kind of wine. Yeah, where this would be wonderful with food. And I think actually enough sort of strength or oomph to even go with something like salmon, or certainly with smoked salmon. Lovely.
Hey, Jack, we have a few questions that came in about the sparkling wines.
That's great.
So somebody wanted to know, do you have a favorite sparkling wine when celebrating the holidays? And if so, what is it?
Well, I have to say that I really like sparkling wines. There's that old song, Love the One You're With. And I tend to do that a lot when it comes to sparkling wines. And of course, part of it has to do with price. I know some of you, in fact, I had mentioned the Amaury, which is a wine that unfortunately you can't find so easily here, but you can find online, that I like as a good everyday wine. One of the wines that I have used, again, not tonight, but I've used in other tastings here, is the Poema Brut. Both of those are not very expensive. In my estimation, well, in fact, the Roederer wines from California are some of the best out of California. I recently, in fact, in class, I did the Schramsberg Blanc de Blanc, and that was absolutely delicious. I know I seem to be equivocating. I have lots of wines that I like a lot. In Champagne, again, price-wise, I'll be honest, one of the things I get for a flash site is Philippe Prie, Prie, that I've always liked, and it's not very expensive. By the way, I get that from WTSO. Again, no big deal. They've been very good to the performing arts, etc., so I don't mind mentioning them as a flash site. That stands for Wine Still Sold Out. I really love Charles Heidsieck, their Brut. Again, it's not inexpensive. It's about $65 a bottle, actually maybe a little more now, but is absolutely delicious and creamy. I also, and that's a fairly heavy champagne, but I really like Blanc de Blancs, which of course is white of the white. So these are 100% Chardonnay champagnes. Some of those, like the Palmer, are absolutely wonderful. I'm going on too long. I'm sorry. And then finally, when you get to the top, Krug. In fact, I'm going to be on the lookout for two people who are idiots enough to join me. There's a Sotheby's, which of course is the big auction house. They're actually having a special virtual tasting of 3 Krug champagnes. The price, of course, is $750, and that's of course for the 3 bottles, which means that's $250 per bottle, and that sounds ridiculously expensive, and I would be the first person to tell you that, but it's Krug, and one of the bottles is 04, and so that actually, if you were to try to buy those wines, it would probably cost you a lot more. So that would be very interesting to try and do. And I'm thinking that would be a really great way to celebrate the holidays. Let me tell you. So that went on too long, Emily, and I'm sorry, but you hit a real favorite of mine, and that's sparkling wines.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, so we have a couple more questions about sparkling wines.
Sure.
One is there was 2 people, Lori and Lyle, both said that they, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce this wine, so I'm sorry. They were not able to find the Wolfberger, so they have an Albrecht.
Oh, yes, Lucien Albrecht.
Yeah. Yep. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because at least
can I ever? And that is the Brut or the Rosé. They are both excellent. And in fact, we used the Lucien Albrecht in the sparkling wine tasting that we did in the summer. See that? I've not gone completely senile. And it really is. That those wines are delicious. I think from my memory, maybe not as much of the mineral character that the Wolfberger has. And that's because, and I cannot remember the exact grapes in the composition, but I'm almost positive they have some Chardonnay in theirs, where this, as you will see, is Pinot Blanc and Auxerrois, where both of which are very, very standard grapes from Alsace. And I think that's why. But no, I have nothing but good things to say about the Lucien Albrecht. Those are excellent sparkling wines from Alsace.
Thank you. And one more. A couple people have asked, what is the best way to recork and store sparkling wine if they're not able to finish their bottles tonight?
In the box, and if somebody wants to find the other box, I'm so glad you mentioned it because I brought one specifically for this reason. I actually brought 2 different ones. And that is, you can buy wine stoppers. And this one is very basic. In fact, this is a good sparkling wine from Alsace. This is Jean Hugl, which I visited when I was there. And what all you have to do with these is put it on and then stick the things over. This isn't holding as well as I would like it to, and it should hold. This is actually a little loose. I don't know why, but these are. I have a couple other ones that I use this for that will hold it in and so hold in the bubbles. The wonderful thing about sparkling wines is because it's carbon dioxide that's coming off, air doesn't get to this wine. And so this wine will still be good 4 and 5 days later without any difficulty. And so you can really have a glass of sparkling wine and then have another glass of sparkling wine the next day, provided there's anything left. This, of course, is a little more, and there's a number of other ones on the market. And this, of course, you put down to the side, and then it goes under, there, finally, and it snaps underneath the glass that sort of comes out right there. And so that holds that in very, very tightly. This is a Perrier Jouet one that I got. I probably had this for a very long time. I was surprised how well it held up. I keep lots of these because, again, you open sparkling wines and you can have a glass or 2. And the thing is the wonderful thing about sparkling wine is it's only about 12 or 12.5% alcohol. So it's fairly low. Never forget, though, very often we drink on an empty stomach. And also the carbon dioxide moves the alcohol into your bloodstream faster. I always love to quote the song, I think from the 40s, you go to my head and you linger like a haunting refrain, like the kicker from a glass of champagne. And that's because you get that because for those reasons, even though it doesn't have a lot of alcohol. So this is the best way. Now you can, of course, shove a cork in if you do it hard enough. And of course, keep it refrigerated because it will keep the pressure down. But buy these. these are wonderful to have, stick in a drawer, and so that you can use them to cork up sparkling wines. The wonderful thing, though, even a good sparkling wine, luckily it doesn't happen often. I've actually had a bottle that was open and almost by mistake and put aside and no one noticed it. And I've poured that wine the next day. And if it's decent sparkling wine, it will still have an amazing amount of bubbles. It really holds the CO2 very, very nicely. And so it does work very, very well. So that's what you need. And you can get them at various prices, and you can get 4 packs of them, I know. And so you can get these, and they're usually not too expensive, but they really are worthwhile to keep around. Okay?
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. So that wine, 90% Pinot Blanc, 10% Pinot Auxerrois, which in fact, I love both of those as a still wine, as a grape variety themselves, made in the traditional method, meaning that first they made the wine. They probably actually made a Pinot Blanc and an Auxerrois. Then they blended them together. They added yeast and sugar to it. Then they put it in that bottle. And so this Wolfberger bottle, this wine fermented within this bottle for 12 months minimum, and actually very often longer. Then they had to, of course, get rid of the yeast by bringing it to the top, freezing the neck, getting rid of that lump of yeast and the yeast and some of the water, and then, of course, filling it with the dosage. And this one did not say exactly how much dosage they added, but my guess in tasting this wine, it's fairly low. It's probably about 9 grams per liter. Lovely stuff. Again, notions of apple, yeast, and lemon come still. A little reduction in this wine's nose. Citric freshness, almost cream mousse. Touch of white pepper. That's a good descriptor. Very nimble and easy to like. Light body has depth and a frothy, dry, and lemony finish. 89 points. This was from the Wine Enthusiast on that wine. Okay. So again, going back to France, St. Nicholas, which of course his day is coming up here on December 6th, is very, very important. I didn't manage. A lot of the people had, in a lot of the countries, they have like a sort of a bad Santa, Krampus, which goes around sort of beating up bad children, which I decided we would just ignore in there. But that is certainly something that you will read about in the things that happen, in fact, in a number of European countries. The Christmas tree. Again, I thought it was very important to talk about things that happen in Alsace. The first Christmas tree, in fact, was supposedly, they've decided, in the little town of Sélestat, which is in Alsace in 1521. And some of this had to do with the Reformation, because, again, it was very typical for people to have a crèche, and this was much more Catholic than it was Protestant. And so they really sort of took, in fact, what was, in fact, the pagan things of the trees and basically Christianized it. And so the Christmas tree really started in Alsace and did not move so quickly to the rest of France until later. It was much more of a German. You might remember that it was Prince Albert who, of course, introduced the Christmas tree to England. And then, of course, it came to America. And so the first Christmas tree, supposedly, they think was, in fact, in the town of Sélestat in Alsace in 1521. So I thought that was interesting. Also, of course, everywhere you have the Christmas markets. And this, again, is, I think, the one in Colmar. And again, they're just really big things with all the Christmas toys and decorations. And of course, typically you drink Glühwein, where they heat the wine that's spiced. And it keeps, of course, it keeps you warm on a cold night. And this is where you go and buy Christmas gifts. And so many of them are extremely elaborate throughout France. And sort of very nice to go to visit in there. This is, in fact, the one in Strasbourg. And you can see, since many of us are obviously not traveling this year for very good reasons, I thought it would be nice to do a little bit of travel, at least through this. By the way, that the building on the side, I seem to remember, is an apothecary that's over 1,000 years old. So it's really wonderful. Strasbourg is a beautiful city to go and visit in there. Again, this is in Colmar. This is, again, one of the Christmas marks. And again, you can see it's just so beautiful and so much in the Christmas season throughout Alsace. And so I thought it would be nice to sort of bring some of the Alsatian things, since that's what we were talking about. Okay. And finally, of course, how can you not talk about dessert and a Kugelhof cake? Again, very typical for Alsace. And so many of the sweets, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the sweets, etc., that, of course, make the holidays so much fun. And so I thought that was very neat to do. So let's try another wine, shall we? In this case, we're going to Austria. And again, sort of again, you look at the label here. This is from Hugl. This is their Gruner Veltliner. Gruner Veltliner is the national grape, I would say. It's their most common grape and very, very typical of Austria. And so I thought it would be nice to do. And it's typically a wine with a fair amount of oomph to it, very food friendly. And so I thought, again, even though we are into winter, would be a wine worth trying. So again, as you saw, not very expensive. This is a liter bottle. And as you know, did not cost much. And of course, because it's not a wine for long aging, it is in a screw cap. By the way, you often see on the top of an Austrian bottle, you will see sort of this Austrian flag. And so you'll very often see the red with the white stripe going through it. Very, very typical on the top of an Austrian wine. It makes it easy to pick them out then. If you're in a cellar or something along those lines, you see that and think, oh, that's where the Austrian wines are for that. So that is this Gruner here. As you can see, very, very light in color. If I put it against the white background, actually it has a decent amount of nice straw color to it in there. And wow, I mean, just a wonderful nose. I don't even have to put it to my nose yet, and I was already getting the aromas from this glass. And so that makes it really nice. So, oh, gee. How inviting. I mean, really, you smell that wine, and it's sort of a little bit of sort of lemon and lime, and so you have the citrus there, maybe a little bit of pepper, green in this case. Just so, and so you just salivate smelling it. It's so nice. It's this wonderful fruit to it. And of course, if you taste this wine, dry, maybe a touch of sweetness. In the nose, in fact, just as, especially right as I was drinking it, I thought that the peppery, almost a little bit of jalapeno came off of this wine a bit. So it really has that wonderful clean pepperiness that's really nice. And of course, with that, again, lemons and limes, sort of nice citrus flavors are there. Nice acid, extremely clean. Sort of very, very nice. Nice wine. Yes, and just a nose has a really good power to it. And certainly for the price. A bit about this wine. It's 100% Gruner, not surprisingly. It's done 100% stainless. And they say, I can certainly see the grapefruit too. Intense and concentrated. And I was actually, it's amazing the amount of intensity of the nose. Concentrated fruit, wine offerings, pleasant citrus and grapefruit aromas, tropical fruits, hint of freshly ground white pepper, again, that pepperiness. Medium body, dry wine with a firm mineral backbone, no question. Crisp acidity on the finish. Nice wine. Nice wine. Any questions, Emily?
Yes, we do have one. Somebody wants to know, can you tell us a little bit of the history? And you may have touched on this, but a little bit of the history and significance of Austrian wines in the market.
Austrian wines are very interesting. They were, I would say, very much a bit player for a very long time, but they certainly were in the market and typically inexpensive wines. And the problem that hit the Austrians was in, I want to say, the late 80s. They had a wine scandal. Some people added some things to the wine that they should not have. It really wasn't as bad as actually that of course, there have been several Italian scandal. But what happened was then no one would buy Austrian wines. I mean, it was like, boom, gone, done. We're not doing it. And so because of that, a lot of the old guard sort of melted away. And the other thing that really happened was that they put in the strictest wine laws in the world. And they had, of course, a lot of younger people coming in who had a lot of really good ideas, and they really pushed all of that. And so now, and it's actually probably been at least 10 years now, time goes fast, where the Austrian wines, especially the Gruners and some of the other wines, especially on the coast, people, sommeliers, of course, because they tend to be trendsetters, really found how good and food-friendly Austrian wines were. Not only this, but they make Zweigelt and Saint Laurent and Blaufränkisch, and they also make world-class sweet wines. And some of the Gruners, especially from the Vokal, the Schmaragd wines, are absolutely wonderful and intense and truly world-class. I was lucky enough to spend a week in Austria. Again, it was a while ago now. I'd love to go back. And some of the wines were, I would put on par with some of the very, very best wines in the world. These are mainly white still, but they're still making really good reds. And their dessert wines are just also amazing. Okay?
Yep, and one more going back to the sparkling wines. How is champagne made different than regular wine?
Well, two things. Actually, most wines, of course, are still, and there's a lot of ways that you can put bubbles into a wine. The most basic, or sometimes the sort of the old method, which has come back. You'll find wines on the market now that are called Pet Nat, and that, of course, is short for Pétillant Natural, meaning that they basically cork up the bottle before the fermentation is finished. And so the fermentation finishes, and of course, one of the byproducts of it is carbon dioxide. And very often there may be a little yeast left in the bottle too. But these can be, some of them are just absolutely wonderful, some a little marginal. But you can find some really good pet nats out on the market. And so that's, in fact, sometimes called the method ancestral. It's the oldest method of getting bubbles in a wine. Then, of course, came champagne. Champagne, of course, you make a wine, and then you blend it, and then you put it in the individual bottles, like the Wolfberger. And so you you mix up the wine with a little bit of yeast and sugar. You put it then in the individual bottles, because you make a big batch, then you put in the bottles. It ferments in the bottle. Eventually, you have to get rid of the yeast. Then you add some sugar and some wine back to it. You put the cage on and the cork, and you have champagne. Typically, though, of course, it has to age a minimum of 15 months in champagne, and if it's vintage, like 3 years. And in many cases, it can be much longer in the bottle. The Rubus and Prosecco and Sekt, which is a sparkling wine from Germany, are made in what's called the Charmat, or the bulk process, or Mariotti in Italy. And this is where you take 10, 20, 30,000 gallons of wine. You put in a tank that can be pressurized. You put water and you put sugar and yeast into the tank with the wine. And then you have a second fermentation in the big tank. And you obviously, it doesn't take very long for fermentation to take place. But you may leave it for several months on the yeast. And eventually you basically take it off and filter it, pressurized in the bottle, in pressure, and you sell it. And so that's how they make Prosecco and a lot of other sparkling wines throughout the world. So that's how you get bubbles in a wine in a nutshell. Okay?
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. The tasting as a best buy again for this wine: fresh green pear drop, a hint of citrus, made from very open, fresh, and appetizing nose. The palate is light, dry, lemony, and fresh, pervading by easy pear flavors. And again, this was a best buy. This is, of course, the Gruner, a best buy in the Wine Enthusiast. So I thought I would share that with you also. Okay. Again, going back again, actually, this is in Austria. Some of the things that happen in Austria, as here in America, are Advent calendar. Advent. Geez, my mind has gone blank. Wreaths, Advent wreaths. And so used to be, and in fact, of course, if it was Catholic, it was 3 purple and a pink. The pink for the 3rd Sunday of Lent, or excuse me, of Advent, which is Gaudete Sunday. And so this, of course, was the time of penance and fasting, getting ready, of course, for Christmas. And so this was very typical. But now, of course, for the most part, they use red. And you can see, of course, they light another candle every Sunday. And so this, of course, is Advent wreaths that are used very widely. A few things I had never heard of, and it was great to see. For example, today, December 4th, Happy Barbaratag. This, of course, happens in Austria. And actually, I found there are other things in France also, but totally different. In Austria, it is traditional on today. Today is the feast of St. Barbara. And so it's Barbara's Day, Barbaratag. What they do is they cut branches of probably apricots or cherries or forsythia. And I was actually surprised, my horticulture background comes along, that they have had enough of a cold treatment. And what they do is they bring the branches in and they force them. They keep them in the house and warm. And if they bloom before Christmas, that's considered good luck. And so this is what they do today. And so if you get your flashlight out, you might want to cut a few more, and you can help celebrate what they do in Austria. Typically, and of course, I've forced branches many times, but normally I don't do it until February, until well after the plant has had enough of cold treatment. So it's like, oh, okay, winter's over, the plant's done too, and so they'll flower. And you can do that with a lot of different branches, like forsythia or crabapple, etc. And so you can do that, but I was surprised they did it that early. But obviously, this is one of the things that they do in Austria during this season. In fact, today, December 4th. This was also interesting. Rauhnacht are, again, 12 days, and these probably harken back to rituals that are pre-Christian. And this was basically using smoke and herbs and other things to purify the house and keep away the devil or evil spirits. And there are 4 major nights, in fact, that are coming up, and I thought it was really interesting. The 12 nights around Christmas are called, as you see, Rauhnacht. In these nights, some people prepare a mixture of blaze, incense, palm branches from Easter, and consecrated herbals, and spread the scent through the whole house. They believe that this custom keeps evil spirits and misfortune out of the house. The most important of the days are the 21st, which is called Thomasnacht, which is also, of course, the solstice. Christnacht, the 24th, in other words, Christmas Eve. Silvesternacht, the 31st. And then Dreikönigsnacht, the Three Kings night, on the 5th, the night before. Supposedly on the 21st, on Thomas Night, this is what they do in Austria. Young people in particular like to play oracle games on this day, probably also as evening entertainment in order to foresee a new wedding or near future, such as whether the next year would bring good luck or bad. Women, of course, who want to marry call on St. Thomas. St. Thomas's feast day is actually in July, but for some reason, because I guess of doubting, he is also associated with this night in this. And so as they step into bed, they ask Holy Thomas to let their sweetness appear in their dreams. And so it's an oracle as to who they're going to marry. And so that happens on the 21st with this. So I thought it was really interesting that this is one of the things that they continue to do. But of course, it's an old tradition that you find in Austria. And of course, Christmas marks. This, of course, is the Christmas mark at the Rathausplatz in Vienna. And again, how beautiful. And of course, how beautiful, of course, Vienna is as a city itself. And so I thought that was just a beautiful picture. And so again, the Christmas season so celebrated in all of these areas. Your next wine is a rosé, and of course we're back into France. And this is of course made by Alain de Treille. This is called Le Rose. And what's interesting about this wine is that it is a vin de France. For those who have taken my class, and of course under John Jaume, it would be the same way. When you learn the classifications of wine in France, it was vin de table, then vin du pays, wine of the country, then VDQS, vin superieur qualité, and then finally appellation d'origine contrôlée, AOC. Vin de France did not exist until about 10 years ago, but this provides people, especially winemakers who have an interest in making good wine but don't want to follow the rules, to make an interesting wine. And so this is one of them. And so this is in fact the Le Rose. I have to say, and I apologize, I will talk a little bit about the wine, but I myself was not able to get this wine. I know a number of people who in fact I've talked to prior to this who managed to get the wine, and Emily, after we finished, in fact, going through it, I meant to talk about the wine. If people have their own ideas about how the wine tastes or what they think about the wines, I would certainly be happy to hear them. This wine is, in fact, even though it is Vin de France, this is the Le Rose, it is a wine from the Loire region. But because it doesn't follow the laws, and as you'll see with the grape varieties, then consequently they bottle it under this label other than bottling it in as being from the Loire. The wine I'm going to taste along with you, because I thought, again, it seems odd to not have, is in fact a Cheverny, which is a rosé also from the Loire. And I will sort of not say a whole lot about mine, but again, give you some idea about the color as compared to what was there and some other things about this wine. Again, the wine is interesting in its combination of grapes. This is the wine that you have, of course, if you do have this wine. It's 40% Gamay, which of course is the typical grape of Beaujolais. But of course, they grow Gamay in other parts of France, and in the Loire they do. It is 40% Cabernet Franc. And this is, in fact, a grape that's very common in the Loire, but also, of course, is grown in Bordeaux. And then finally, 20% Pinot Noir, another grape that's grown in the Loire, especially in Sancerre. You can get a white or a red Sancerre. But of course, Pinot Noir is the main grape of Burgundy. And of course, it is the major red grape of Champagne. The age of the vines are 25 years old. How do you make a rosé? You give it a very short skin contact. And as you can see, part of this cuvee, not the whole thing, but one of the grapes had 12 hours of skin contact, meaning that because you realize that all the color in a grape are in the skins. And so consequently, you need to have the skins in there to get that pink color to come out with this. The other part is from directly pressed grapes. Part of the wine is aged in oaks for a few months. They didn't say exactly which ones. And of course, slightly filtered after bottling. Actually, I think I will hold off. I will taste this wine and you will taste your wine. And then I will be very interested. I'll tell you a little bit about the Cheverny, which I am drinking. And luckily I didn't get anything on the glass I just spelled over. And then you please tell me about the wine that you are drinking. Mine, of course, is really very strawberry. Amazing strawberry. And I'll be honest, I have had several bottles of this wine, and it's made by Kermit Lynch, the wine I have, which is a very, very good importer. Kermit Lynch you can rely on tremendously. And what I had is one of these bottles earlier, and maybe it was slightly corked. I really wasn't so crazy about it, but this is really lovely. Strawberries. And you'll get very often a strawberry nose. In fact, really strong strawberry nose. And of course, with this wine, and almost a mintiness, a real herbalness to it. Good flavor, nothing. Paper towel, we get rid of that. For that. And I'll give people, let's see here. This wine, of course, was given the wine that you are drinking, the Alain, is an interesting blend, as he says, of 40% Cabernet Franc, 40% Gamay, 40% Pinot Noir. The 2019 La Rose offers a lighter pink ruby hue, as well as a pretty bouquet of watermelon, cherries, and white flowers. Quite elegant and complex, has a medium-bodied richness on the palate, nicely integrated acidity, and a clean, dry finish. More than a simple rosé, and grows on you with time in the glass. So I'm hoping you enjoy it. I want to make a mention, and then I will open up and see if Emily has anyone to tell me their feelings about this wine. Just to tell you a little bit about, so that, again, that you know about the difficulties in the wine trade. Of course, this year it's been especially bad. As you know, it's not only wine, but everything. The distribution systems have been tremendously disrupted. And of course, in our wine laws, of course, as we do, we have less laws for cannabis. And there's 2 states that have allowed now the use of psychedelic mushrooms and other things. And yet, I really think our wine laws are stuck in the Middle Ages, and certainly in the 40s or 30s when Prohibition, of course, the Volstead Act was repealed. And so that's part of the problem. And again, not a lot of people drink rosés after Thanksgiving, even though it makes a great Thanksgiving wine. And there are plenty of rosés like this one, I think, which hold up very, very well, make a great aperitif on any winter evening, or even sitting in front of the fire. You don't find them so often. And so that's why, and I apologize for those of you who did not or were not able to get this wine. And of course, that includes me in there. And so that's what's going on with this. Anyone have any things about the wine, what they thought, Emily?
Nobody's written in about the wine. They did ask, will you show your bottle of rosé?
Sure, happy to.
But if any of you do have the bottle, please do write in and let us know what you think of it. Here, let me put you on the... And can you repeat the name of it?
Sure. It's Cheverny. It's a Domaine de la Salvarde. It's a Domaine, and of course, Domaine, Domaine, D-U, excuse me. And then it's S-A-L-V-A-R-D. And this is 18. The 19, of course, was already out. But this is another good example. This wine is drinking beautifully. And in fact, I will let you in on a really good secret to know. Next spring, when it becomes rosé season, which is really sort of dumb, as though you have to stop. It's, it's like no white pants after Labor Day. It's sort of, those kinds of dumb rules. You will find that like the 2019s, people will be selling off for a song. Well, if the wine was well made, it's still drinking fine throughout 2021. But the 2020s will be coming on the market, and so they want to get rid of them. And so you can find great buys on rosés in April, May, and June because they're getting rid of the 2019s to make room for the 2020s. And so that's a good thing to keep in mind because, again, buy a bottle, take it home, think, hey, this is good. And they're selling it for $5.99, $6.99. I think I'll go buy a case. And it can very often be your rosé for the rest of the year. Okay.
Somebody did write in. They said, so one person wrote in, they said, not impressed. Beautiful color, very bland, unpleasantly coats the tongue. So maybe it's a good.
Maybe I'm glad I didn't get it. Well, and I will be interested. In fact, and I am going to try to get a bottle because I am interested to see what it is like. And trust me, I doubt that it's sold out. It's just that people are reluctant to bring in rosés, even though, of course, we still drink white in the wintertime. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it sort of does in some ways, and I can certainly understand that. And so that's what's going on there. So yeah, so that'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see if anyone else writes in about their ideas of the wine, and maybe I'm glad I didn't get to taste it. I feel badly though, because I try to find the best wines for you that I can for the tastings. And if nothing else, it's an educational experience. Let's put it that way. Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you know if other people write in. Somebody did say, so you do drink rosé year round then?
Yes. And I'll be honest, of course it's true. but of course, I drink a lot less. I do drink reds in the summertime, but I drink a lot less red in the summertime. I drink a lot more reds in the wintertime, and it's certainly true. I drink a lot more whites and rosés in the summertime because, again, it lends itself to it, sitting on the deck, those kinds of things. But still, oh no, I mean, I would drink this Cheverny, no problem at all. It makes a wonderful aperitif. It would make a nice for a first course. Again, I think it has enough strength to go with salmon, and I certainly eat salmon in the wintertime. So yeah, so I have no problem having rosés in the winter. Again, they had a really great buy on a Bandol rosé, Bandol. And Bandols are, I mean, they are full-bodied, rich rosés that in many cases can age for years. And so, but again, it's a year old. We need to get rid of it. And so sometimes you can find really good buys. And so it's one of those things to keep an eye out for when it comes to that. Okay?
Yep. So that's the last question on rosé, but somebody did say that they found the wine on timelesswines.com thanks to your recommendation. And that it had an acidic finish.
Oh, okay.
So there's another one on that.
Sure. And they say, of course, nicely integrated acidity. Hopefully it is, and it's not too acid. So thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Okay. So again, going back to some of the things that happen, of course, not only, of course, in Alsace or in Austria, but of course, in France, you have, of course, the Christmas markets. And again, it's the same thing. They don't drink I don't remember them drinking as much Glühwein, for example, in Paris, as they do certainly in Trier or in Alsace. But certainly is because, again, it's that spiced wine. It's nice and warm, and it keeps you warm as you're going around looking at things, and of course, and having the pastries and all the things that, of course, are typical with Christmas. And so this is what you find in France. In fact, I took this picture today. This is, in fact, was one of my buys. I ended up going to the Christmas market at Saint-Sulpice in Paris. And what this is when they make sparkling wines, they use an A-frame like this called a pupitre, but of course it stands about 4 foot tall. And where you see the caps of champagne bottles, that's where you'd put the bottles in. And what they would do is they would move them and very slowly put them so they were upside down so that the yeast would go to the bottom. That's how they used to get rid of the yeast. And so this was a mock-up sort of, but they made a place big enough so that you could, in fact, display the tops of champagne bottles, which many of them, in fact, are very, very lovely, as you can see. And so these are the ones these are bottles that I had when I was in Luxembourg. And so it's been a great sort of remembrance of there. Though I was surprised. I guess I don't look at it often enough. The one up in the top left-hand corner is the Widow Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot. And she's faded over the years. She should have a lot more color. I was surprised to see how much that metal cap had faded over the years. I will tell you, two down, that Paul Roger 1990, I still remember how good that wine was. That was absolutely delicious wine. So again, you can, even though you may taste them over an hour or two, you can remember them for a very long time. The next wine that we're having, of course, is a red. This is Château de Segries, Côte de Rhone. And so let's have that, shall we? Again, Côte de Rhone, Côte is French for hills. And so these are the hills around the Rhone River. And Château de Segries, they and Moderé, in fact, they're related. Everybody in the wine world seems to be related when you go to Europe. In there, again, a very, very good producer in this. And actually, this is not the exact same label, because on the label of the 18, it's 14.5% alcohol. And I see it's 14 on that label. I was just sort of curious with that. So again, if I pour this out first, and then we'll talk about the wine, and I'll tell you a bit about it. First of all, even though this is 18, and so of course it is over 2 years old, it has a good red color with actually some garnet highlights. There's a little purple. Oh yeah, there's definitely a little purple to that wine. And so that means that it's still really fairly young. By the way, Côte de Rhone, there are well over 100,000 acres in the Côte de Rhone. They make a lot of it. And I will tell you flat out, Côte de Rhone, Valpolicella, a couple other wines I can think of. These are reds that are never expensive, are eminently drinkable, and wonderful food wines. They're not overly heavy. They go with a lot of stuff. This can be a spaghetti pizza wine. This can be with red sauces. This can be with stews. So many things. These wines are so versatile that makes it really nice. Again, great color. If you swirl and smell this wine, again, wow. It's just that wonderful ripe fruit, black cherries, and this way black berries. So nice. Very nice. And of course, if you taste this wine, first of all, because it's the first red, you notice the tannins. Certainly there. But good acidity, nice grip, and that nice, really almost like blackberry jam kind of flavor to it. And it has a little bit of too of the of that what the French, especially this area, called garrigue. It's that mixture of herbs. It's sort of like rosemary and sage and thyme all together, and so it has that really nice herbal quality, which of course makes it so well. You could do this with coq au vin. You could do this with, chicken in a red sauce with herbs. You could do this with beef. I mean, there's just all kinds of things where this wine would just sing and would not overpower the food, and vice versa. That would be really, really nice with this wine. This, of course, is Chateau de Segries. It is, in fact, actually the building from this. Again, in a warmer time. This is what it looks like probably in September, as the grapes have been almost getting ready to be picked, etc. And you can see, in fact, some red grapes there. This wine is 50% Grenache, 30% Syrah, 10% Cinot, and 10% Carignan. So again, which is very, very typical. Côte de Rhone are almost always blends, and Grenache is the most important grape in the south. Syrah more to the north, but still, in fact, this is actually fairly heavy in Syrah for a southern Rhone wine, but not that unusual. Cinot, of course, another one, and Carignan, a very old variety, which can make very, very nice wines. 30-year-old vines. 8 days of skin maceration in temperature-controlled vats, aged 90% in concrete tanks, and only 10% in oak barrels. So what you're getting is the natural tannins from the grape. You're not getting a lot of oak tannins from this wine, and so it is, and really, really good fruit. And a lot of people like using concrete because it sort of holds the temperature better than stainless does, and so that's one reason that they enjoy doing that. Nice wine, really beautiful, beautiful color, nice flavors, and really cries out for food. I mean, right away, it's like, oh, and this would go so well with just, as I said, so many things. So I'm hoping you're enjoying it. Certainly, you could do this with cheeses, but certainly mushrooms, various kinds of meats would be great. And roasted vegetables, oh, delicious. Jeb Dunnick gave this 88, an impressive effort, happy to drink. Me too. Ample dark berry fruits as well as peppery herbs and a touch of minerality. Medium-bodied richness, a fleshy, expansive mouthfeel, and a great finish. It would be a great house red and should keep nicely for 3 to 5 years. I don't have an exact date on when this is, but again, it's been some time, not much time in oak, but it's probably been out, the 18's probably been out for at least a year or so. And so, yes, you could certainly drink this wine, no problem, till probably 2024 without any difficulty. I'm not sure I'd keep it that long, just because winter's coming. There's lots of good food you could have with this wine. Any questions, Emily?
Yes, we do. Okay, so a few more people wrote in about the rosé.
Thank you.
Somebody said the rosé, that it was great. They said they really liked it. Another person said, I think it's not too sweet, not too dry, very smooth, and no aftertaste.
Oh,
But it does taste like strawberries. And somebody else said that they disagreed with it not being good and said that it's got more distinctly fruit flavor than a lot of rosé.
Oh, excellent. Well, good. I'm glad to get some feedback. That's excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That's fun. Yes.
Yeah. Somebody else wanted to know why, and I don't know if it's the same for your bottle, but why is the cork for the Chateau different than a normal cork? And did you notice that on your bottle at all?
Oh, actually, this is good. Actually, I happen to have the cork in front of me. Yeah, it's plastic. And of course, it costs less. And because to an extent you don't, this sort of opens a whole can of worms. Typically, plastic corks are not still as good as real cork. It's tough to corks. But we're not expecting to keep this wine for a long period of time. And so it's perfectly fine to finish the bottle with this cork with this. But yeah, they're absolutely correct. And I did not notice because, in fact, someone else opened the wines. But it's plastic. So I'm glad it's right here. And so it's perfectly fine for this. It's because they're typically less expensive. Now you can get sort of less expensive corks that they often use in many cases, but so it's fine. And so it's not surprising that you get that. And of course, you see they actually have the Chateau on the label and Chateau de Segries, the whole thing. And so of course, then and of course it says it's also 100% recyclable, and it is from Noma cork, which in fact is probably one of the biggest, if not the largest producer of synthetic corks in the world. And so the thing about synthetic corks is they really used to be pretty bad, and especially if you had a sweet wine, because the sugar would make almost a little bit of lubrication. And so when you tried to put a corkscrew in it, it would just simply push it in. And so that wasn't good, but they've gotten better and better all the time. Natural cork is still a wonderful natural product, but the synthetic corks, in fact, have gotten to be very good. And in a less expensive wine, you will certainly see them. So that was a good eye that they noticed that.
All right. And one more quick one.
Sure.
Before we head on to the last wine, what is your opinion on the difference between French reds and Italian reds?
Well, they're both, of course, they're great wines in both places. As a general, and again, and every generality means that there are probably hundreds of exceptions to this. I find that Italian reds tend to be possibly a little less tannic. I find too, and again, these are generalities and certainly not my problem, but I find that some people who have a reaction to red wines have less of a reaction or don't have a reaction to Italian reds where they do with French reds. The problem, again, with the generality is that it is a generality. And so a Bordeaux, which of course is going to have a lot of tannins, is going to be a lot bigger than a Burgundy, will have very different characteristics as of course, a Chianti will be very different than a Barolo in there. But I would say in general, a little less tannin in Italian reds, and they're both food friendly. The Italian reds might be a little more food friendly, but that's apples and oranges. I mean, there's so little difference between them. So again, I'm not sure I can give you a better answer than that. Okay?
Yep. Thank you so much.
Sure. So this was the other thing that was interesting, was that another thing that happens today, this is a big day. I had no idea. That in fact, of course, Barbara is Barbe in France. And on this day, especially in the south of France, they take wheat especially, or other seeds, and they plant them in small pots. And they also grow them. And I never found out completely what the reason was. Maybe they have cats, that they grow them then. And so they have the greens at Christmas time. And so this is one of the things that they do. They actually start, and I think it has something to do with good luck, and also I think keeping away sort of spirits, etc., and having something green in the house. And so this is what they do today. They will plant wheat that will then, of course, grow and probably, of course, will be 3 or 4 inches tall for Christmas Day and be a nice sort of green that will be there. And so this was very interesting that that's one of the things that they do in the south of France. And, of course, we're in the south of France, and so I thought that would mention it. The other thing, of course, is the santon. These, of course, are the clay figures. And I thought that, I mean, how wonderfully, sort of countrified, etc. This, of course, is the shepherd with his sheep that are this. And, of course, the crèche, and, of course, those wonderful crèches, of course, from the south of France are so important, as they are, of course, in the south of Italy. But they make all of these clay figurines, and, people collect them over the years, and they have them, and the towns do them, etc. But I thought this is also something that's very, very particular to the south of France, and that are these clay figurines. And again, I just think those are just absolutely adorable. It's just sort of really very nice for that. And of course, the other great thing I thought was here, again, I missed this all these years. On Christmas, they have 13 desserts in the south of France. So, hey, way to go. And most of them tend to be some of sort of with poverty, etc. In fact, again, just to sort of say, it says, what would Christmas in Provence be without 13 puddings in reference to Christ and his 12 apostles? There's no fixed list, but they typically include 4 mendicants, in other words, or beggars, who evoke the religious orders having vows of poverty: figs and raisins, almonds and walnuts, dates, black and white nougat, and gibassier, which is olive oil blend, bread, along with these other from Aix-de-Provence and navettes from Marseille. Fresh fruits include grapes or mandarins, candied fruits, quince, cheese, etc. So it's not unusual to have 13 desserts. Way to go, south of France, for Christmas time. So I thought that was pretty amazing to see, and some of the things, in fact, that you can see that, in fact, are typical desserts from that area. Our final wine, of course, is also from the south of France, and much in that area. It is a Lirac, and this is from Alain Jaume, an excellent producer from that area. So again, 2016, it is the Clos de Sixte Lirac. Lirac is an area, it's very interesting. Probably, and I would think that most experts would agree, that the best wines from the southern Rhone come from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This is the area around the summer palace of the Pope that is on a higher area and has very good drainage. And that was the only area that you knew. Everything else was Côte de Rhone. Starting probably in the 60s and 70s, you had a number of areas in that really felt that they make better wines, and they do. And so this is an ongoing process. And so a number of these areas sort of came into prominence. I always think of Gigondas or Vaccarat, and one of them being Lirac. This is across the river, across the Rhone from Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and is making more and more of a name for itself. So again, this wine, a bit darker in color, and even though it's still 16, it is, of course, still fairly garnet. I mean, that certainly is not a complete red. There are purple highlights to that wine. I have it over there to the side, putting it, against a white background under a good light to see it. And if you swirl and smell this wine, you've gone a step up, you know? It's a Côte de Rhone. It's from that region, but it has a concentration of aromas and a weightiness to those aromas, which are just wonderful. Again, dark fruits, blackberries, more of that herbalness, that garrigue that is there. Very rich, but it comes out with a really wonderful fruit perfume. Nice dark fruits. Oh, that's a beautiful wine. Did you taste it? Oh, yes. For one thing, the first thing I think of, it's already delicious, but you could hold this wine for 10, 12, 15 years, no problem at all. There is so much flavor. There's good tannins. There's good sweetness to that wine. It really is quite lovely. Just amazing. Really, really nice. It just has a depth of flavor to it that makes it quite special. Again, this is the area. They, in fact, show this, from Jaume. He owns a number of things. Even though this was on their website, I'm not sure 100% this is Lirac, because you are looking at the galets there, which are very typical of Châteauneuf. And there may be other places that have that overlay of rock, which is very typical. But even every place in Châteauneuf does not have that. They have several different soils within Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This wine is 50% Grenache. Again, being the major grape, certainly very important. 35% Syrah and 15% Mourvèdre. Mourvèdre, again, another very typical grape from the south. Certified organic. The soil is limestone, alluvial soil of quartz, sand, and rock. Traditional winemaking, stainless steel vats. So they vinify it in stainless steel. Hand-sorted bunches, crushed and destemmed. Fermentation at hot and warm, 30 degrees C. So again, getting up into the upper 80s. 18 days of vatting with pigage, meaning that they punch it down so that the skins, etc., are in the juice, so that they can get, as it's fermenting, they get a lot of color and flavor out of there. Aged in concrete vats and French oak barrels, 30% for 16 months. And you can tell that. I mean, there's so much more. There's not a heavy oak to this, but there's more oak to this wine, and really is quite lovely. And right away, oh yeah, there's just a wonderful, it's almost a sandalwood coming off of that wine. There's a really wonderful herbal spice that's coming out of this wine. And again, what would I serve it with? Again, typically once a year, I make cassoulet, which is very typical of that region, and it would be a great cassoulet wine. But again, so many things, various stews and braises, etc., because this wine has the oomph to stand up to anything. I mean, really, you could do, because of that thing, you could do stuff off the grill, and certainly wintertime grilling is certainly another wonderful thing to do. Oh yeah, that smokiness, it would stand up to something that would be barbecued or even smoked. That this wine is just beautiful. By the way, I'm not the only person to think so. Got 93 plus from the Advocate. The 16 Lirac Clos de Sixte is terrific wine, easily the rival of many Châteauneufs. Flowering Garrive and ripe cherries, blend of 50% Grenache, 35% Syrah. Full-bodied wine is lush and concentrated in the palate, then turns velvety on the long finish. Treat it like a Châteauneuf-du-Pape in terms of cellaring, hold it for a few years, then drink it over the next 15. So again, this wine is to be, and again, it's glorious and is not break the bank. Which is this is a wine you could buy a case of, and you could drink over the next 15 years if you kept it that long, if you could even keep it that long. 93 points from the wine enthusiast, freshy plum and black cherry flavors juxtaposed with dark shades of anise, crushed granite, and sage in this bold, richly textured wine. Polished and penetrating, the wine is lifted by tangs of crushed mineral in the mid-pot. Drinks beautifully now, but should continue to improve through 2026. So you got a little while. 93 points. Just delicious. Questions or comments, Emily?
Yes, we do have some. So a couple people said that they were only able to find the 2015 versus the 2016. Do you have any comments on the 15?
Oh, darn. No, I don't. In fact, and I have not had it. I can certainly take a second, or I can get somebody to look it up for me and see if there's anything about the 15 about that. Because it would be interesting. It would be certainly interesting to know. Yeah, the Cotes Sixte. Mm-hmm.
All righty. And one more while we wait then is, how do you store your red wines? Do you control the temperature and humidity where you store your red wine?
Yes, of course. If you're going to store wines for a long time, the most important thing is, for one thing, it doesn't always have to be sideways. There's been good research now that show that if the bottles are upright, it's okay, but sideways is probably a little better. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, you don't want an area that's going to change temperature very much. You want the wine to basically, and again, it's nice. I have a place downstairs. In fact, I actually sort of walled it off, but it has soil, obviously, on the other side of the wall, on both sides. So it stays cool summer and winter. And so, of course, probably the temperature rises and falls a bit, but you don't want an area where the temperature changes a lot, because obviously when a liquid warms, it expands and then it contracts. Well, if it expands and some of the juice comes out, and then when it contracts, you're going to get air in that wine. And so it's going to age faster. And so that's not a good idea. And so you don't want that. Obviously not in light. And the cooler, the better within reason. 60 degrees, 55 degrees is fine when it comes to all of that in there. So again, so that certainly is fine for that wine in there. And the 15 also did very, very well. Parker gave it a 93. It's they say serious, large-scale, voluptuous effort. Has lots of ripe tannin, so it's probably a little bigger than the wine that we're tasting right now. Bit of copious amounts of blackberries, black cherries, scorched earth, licorice, and roasted herbs. One of the bigger bones and concentrated reds in the lineup. It has at least a decade of longevity, and they gave it from 91 to 93. So again, I think that the wines of Alain Jaume are basically very good wines. And so if you have the 15, 16, and I certainly haven't even looked at 17, I'm not sure it's here, but he is an excellent producer. They have actually been making wine. They were established in like 1826, and it was founded by Mathieu Jaume. And this is now the 5th and 6th generation running this place. And so they really know what they are doing. And so, yeah, so great wines. Very, very nice. Okay. So when we talk about the Christmas season, we're getting towards Christmas. And one of the things that the French do, as only the French do, but by the way, this is also something that you can enjoy if you happen to decide to go to New Orleans for Christmas. And that is the Réveillon, or the awakening. And in France, they tend to do this. This is a Christmas Eve dinner. In France, they tend to do it before midnight mass, but in many other places, and probably in France again, they will come back at 2 a.m. after midnight mass, which of course takes place at midnight, and have a feast. And so you have these wonderful feasts on Christmas Eve, typically more than Christmas Day, with all of these wonderful foods, etc. And of course, you see this picture here of this. It was very big in New Orleans sort of pre-Civil War and then disappeared. And then, of course, places like Galatoire's and Commander Palace, etc., they brought it back again. This, of course, is a strange year, and so it may not be as much. But in fact, this is something that is very celebrated now in New Orleans also, but of course also throughout France. And this, of course, is this wonderful food on Christmas Eve, because of course they've been fasting in many cases for, at least that was traditional, for the month before. And so having these kinds of amazing dinners. And of course, how do you finish a Christmas dinner but with a bûche de Noël, a Christmas log or the Christmas cake? This again is very, very traditional. Many of you, of course, who lived in Oxford or still live in Oxford may remember Mary Jo's cuisine. Mary Jo Wendell made wonderful bûche de Noël. And these, of course, are Christmas logs that, in fact, are very often decorated with meringue, etc. And so this is a very, very typical Christmas dessert. And so a wonderful way to celebrate the season. Questions, Emily?
Yes, we do have some, not necessarily about this wine, but just about wine in general.
Sure.
So do you have a favorite region for wine?
No. I have several, again, it's funny, and I say this all the time. When I go to a wine shop, there are certain places that I gravitate. I'll be honest, and certain grape varieties that I tend to like or look for, and so I think I've made this fairly obvious. I like sparkling wines. I really like certain grape varieties. I really like Gewürztraminer. I really like Pinot Noir. And so Pinot Noir from Oregon, Pinot Noir from Burgundy, good Pinot Noirs from Russian River, or especially some of the places, especially closer, like Sonoma Coast, are very, very good. And so those are grapes I like. I really like white Burgundies. They're Chardonnays, but they tend to be more restrained. And luckily, California Chardonnays are becoming not as much oak. And so I really like those. But again, I really like Rieslings. We only have a few more minutes, and so I probably should stop there. But yeah, and of course I like dessert wines. I'm really lucky. I like wine, and so it's really fun to try. And the thing is there are so many grape varieties out there. I mean, I thought it was really neat. Like that first wine, it had Arent, it had Colombard, it had Uni Blanc in it. And to taste the wine, it's like, whoa, they made good wine out of all of those grapes. That's wonderful. And there are some new grapes, sort of new kids on the block that are coming out, even from Minnesota, the Marquette. And again, not so much they're grown there, but other places. There's some really interesting grapes coming out that have some really good flavors. And I think to limit yourself to only one wine or only one region, it's like, well, do you only have one color in your closet? It's like it's fun to try different things. But yes, but there are certainly places. And I will say I don't care for really, I don't like heavy wines that don't have then good acidity. They're out of balance. And so those are probably the things I stay away from more than anything else. Questions?
So you definitely don't discriminate on your wine.
I'm pretty indiscriminate. Can't you tell? God.
So we have two-ish more questions. One's kind of a two for one. So somebody said that they were a student in your very first semester of teaching viticulture in the fall of 1995. And they want to know, how has the class changed over the years? And within that question, somebody else asked, where can they get the openers that you use for Bio 244? Their daughter was in your class and they want one for themselves.
I want an opener. And I will have to check. I get my openers from the Wine Appreciation Guild, and possibly, especially if someone from a previous year, I probably shouldn't say this because I'm probably going to open an amazing can of worms. But if someone was for a previous year, because I only started sort of giving out the openers in the last 5 or 6 years, write me. I'll probably send you one. It's only the university's money. But the Wine Appreciating Guild does it, and I really do like them because, as I said many times, in fact, this is the current one. I really like having the double hinge, and of course, as we've talked about when we've done this before, having the Teflon on the worm is very nice, and having the double hinge makes it easy to open them. And so, yes, it's good and sturdy. So I really like these openers. I'm not sure if the Wine Appreciation Guild sells other ones, but it is one. In fact, actually, I have one person who, in fact, I've promised to send it to them, but life's been a little crazy, and I will not forget. I have not forgotten that person. I will send them an opener, but it really is good. And so that is one thing that I really like. The other question, getting to the first question, I hope, in essence, the wines class hasn't changed a whole lot. For me, teaching the class, I want you to learn the traditional wines. I mean, the wine world has increased. And so as I spend more time talking about wines in the Southern Hemisphere, and I talk about some of the trends in wines, etc., and I certainly hope I do. But what my feeling about the class is, I want you to have a good grounding in the basics of Burgundy and Bordeaux and California and Germany and Italy and Spain and those places, so that you can then say, I can try anything. I can go from there as a springboard. And so, to a great extent, and maybe I'm just old, it hasn't changed a whole lot. Obviously, the wines are the thing, but because I want you to taste the classic wines, because we don't have time to do all the rest of them. Maybe I should teach a second class. And so, to a great extent, it hasn't changed from there. It's expanded in some ways, but if you look at the book that you got in '95, and you look at the book that you got, sure, I've expanded it. There's lots of changes. Hopefully it's in better shape, etc. A lot better maps. But I think in essence, it's the same. So that's my answer.
Alrighty, and one last one to go along with the theme of tonight. What do you look for in a wine that you serve during the holidays?
Well, first and foremost, I look at my guests, and I want to serve them something that I think that they will like. And I want to serve them something that they will appreciate. And that's not saying that, again, someone else, and I, trust me, I love having students over, and I'm hoping that there are many students out there who can attest to the fact that I will open extremely rare or esoteric or expensive wines when students are there, because I think that's the only way you learn. But for me, it's, how can I best serve my guest? I think that's, and so that's the criteria. And so, and if someone asks me, I mean, and trust me, it's like, oh, if someone says, and I will ask people, what have you tried, or what might you be interested in tasting? And so then it's like, well, sure, of course I'll open it. Because wine's to drink. It's not to store away in some cellar. It's to enjoy, and it's to enjoy with people, because I think it's a way to, especially in this whole COVID mess, it's how you bring people together, and even in this way, hopefully, we feel like we're a community, and that's what's important.
Well, Jack, thank you so much. We did get a lot of great feedback from tonight.
Well, here it is. So, happy holidays, obviously, from me and the Miami Alumni Association. Take care all, and stay safe. And thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Alrighty.
Any other questions?
No, that's all for tonight.
Great.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you all once again for joining us tonight, and a big thank you to Jack for his time. We did have a lot of questions come in tonight, so I apologize if we were not able to get to your questions. For those of you asking, Jack is on campus, and he is in the Staley Lounge in the Merstein Alumni Center, of course, practicing social distancing and wearing a mask when he is not on camera. So I do invite you to check out our other Alumni Association webinars. They are free and open to all on our webinar site, alumlc.org/MiamiOH. You can see that at the bottom of the screen. As always, have a great weekend and love and honor.